Gwen, whenever it's time to get started, we're ready to go back here.
Great, thank you so much. Looks like we need a few more counselors to join. I'll give it a couple more minutes. We're not quite at 9:50 yet. Ellen, did you want Annie elevated to present?
Maybe Jill.
Jill? Okay, is Jill?
Yeah, since this is about budget, I think that would be, I think she's on.
Okay, she's already in. Yeah, okay. Okay, well, we will get going, and I think more counselors will join as we, oh, I see, I think we might be getting close. Great, we've got some more counselors on now, so. All right, I'm going to call the Budget and Finance Committee for the City of Missoula City Council to order. It is August 3rd, 2022. We are still meeting virtually, although in September we will go to hybrid. Our voicemail, if you want to leave us public comment as a voicemail, the phone number is 552-6012. If you want to email council, you can email us at council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And if you want to join the meeting, I recommend going to the city website, finding the meetings and agendas page, going to this meeting agenda, and there is a link that you can click on to join the meeting to provide public comment. So Lisa, will you please do a roll call for attendance?
Certainly. Stacy Anderson.
Present.
Mirta Becerra. Let's see, no Mirta yet. Daniel Carlino. No Daniel. John Contos.
Here.
Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Kristen Jordan. Absent. Mike Nugent.
Present.
Jennifer Savage. Absent. Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica.
Present.
And Heidi West. Absent. And did we just have someone join? Let's see. Okay, so it looks like we have 7 counselors present and 5 currently absent.
Great, thank you. We have minutes from July 27th, 2022 to approve. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved, and I'll take public comment on items not on the agenda. If anyone wants to give public comment, please raise your hand. All right, I'm not seeing any public comment on items not on the agenda, so we'll go forward with our agenda. And for the remainder of the time in this committee, we are hopefully getting close to wrapping up presentations for the fiscal year 2023 executive budget. So today we've got Missoula Redevelopment Agency. That'll take a chunk of time. We have a few more questions with the police department since we ran short of time last week. We've got the Business Improvement District, and then we have, it's labeled council deliberations, and I just want to clarify that right now that I would describe it more as council discussions. We're going to go over what information we would still like to see next week, if there's any additional questions, and go over the calendar for procedurally how we will approach the budget. So that's, I think, a clearer description of what we'll be doing. All right, so we will go forward. Our first presentation today is with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. We've got a chunk of time for that. And Ellen, did you want to kick that off or?
Sure.
All right, good morning.
Good morning, Ellen Buchanan, the director of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. As you mentioned, we do have a fairly lengthy PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to kind of try to fly through as quickly as possible. So please interrupt me if you have questions as we go. And I will point out before we get started that the numbers that you see for revenue are FY22 numbers because we did not have our taxable values when this was being put together. We didn't get those until this week, and we're still evaluating those and making sure that there are no omissions or errors or anything. So you're looking at FY22 numbers. They haven't changed substantially because this was not a reappraisal year. Some districts went up, some went down. We're trying to understand why the variances that we hadn't expected, but you are looking at last year's numbers. So with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen and we'll get started. So can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let's try this one. How about now?
Not
Oh,
yet.
never mind. I didn't click share. That would be helpful.
Yes, looks
all
good.
right, we're good. Okay. So once again, we're the MRA, the Redevelopment Agency. We handle all the TIF funds and the urban renewal districts for the city. I also have Jill Dunn on here, who is our business and project manager, who knows these numbers forward and backward. So this is not advancing. Okay. So this is kind of we try to look at the city of Missoula City Council's priorities and strategic goals as we review projects, bring them in, evaluate them. Basically, those are the safety and wellness, community design and livability, environmental quality, economic health, and organizational excellence. And you will see as we go through this that we've tried to tie the projects that I've highlighted in this presentation back to which of these goals they meet. MRA staff, we've grown to now 7 people. We recently, as you well know, added a communication specialist in Macy McPherson. Todd, Jill have been here for a very long time. Annette and Leslie and myself, not as long a time, but I'm pushing 20 years now. So longevity here is a thing. Annie Gorski is our new deputy director who replaced Chris Bien, who retired after 30 some years. So we're going to start with Urban Renewal District 2. This district, as you know, is a little unique as opposed to the other districts because we have a strategic exit plan that we've created for this district, and our board has adopted that. City Council has been informed about it and seemed to concur. There were no objections to what we had in there. So What I've done in each one of these districts is I've looked at the estimated carryover from FY22, and that may not be a precise number because things are still finalizing for last fiscal year. I've shown revenue. That revenue is based on, once again, our FY22 revenue, debt service, and I've indicated what we've bonded, all of which were approved by City Council, of course. And then that comes down to total available funds. And I've shown here budgeted funds and committed funds. So budgeted funds are things you may see in the CIP, but they haven't been committed in the budget at this point. And then what is our uncommitted balance that we've got left based on last year's numbers and based on what's budgeted. We also had our financial advisors do a bonding capacity analysis for all of our districts. And you'll notice the last item on these slides will be the bonding capacity in that district as of July 1st of 22. And District 2 has $16.9 million in bonding capacity based on last year's numbers and a projected uncommitted balance of $320,000 until we get in our next revenues. So once again, we have a 10-year exit strategy, which created priority projects. It was a lengthy process where we went through a working group that involved some council members, board members, and staff, both administration and MRA. And basically we have 7 priorities that have been identified. Sidewalk network build out, which we've been working on since the recession, and have many miles of sidewalk that have been built in that district solely through the use of TIF funding with no assessments against properties that were adjacent to those sidewalks. We've recently started a water main network build out. We feel like one of the best things we can do in that district and others, if it's appropriate, is make sure that the infrastructure that's needed to support development is in place when there is no longer TIF revenue to upsize a water line or extend a water line. And that's where our biggest utility deficiency is. So we are methodically, just like we've done for the sidewalks, we're methodically committed to building out that water main network for the district and the sidewalks for the district. Mrl Trestle Project being part of the trail, you've heard a lot about. That's one of our very top priorities. River and Riverbank Improvements is the top priority probably, or one of them, because we're in danger of losing our riverbank and possibly parts of the trail on the south side of the river right now. Land banking to support housing and the things that are needed to support high density housing like parkland, et cetera. Bitterroot trail lighting, we think this is a good opportunity with districts 2 and 3 looking at sunsetting down the road to go ahead and fund lighting the entirety of the Bitterroot trail in the next couple of years. And in the California Street reconstruction, which has been, it's been designed, but we have not, as a city, figured out how we're going to entirely fund it. And there is not enough TIF capacity to do that by itself. So sidewalks this year in this budget, we've got about $635,000 programmed for that. Water mains, about $500,000 programmed in FY23. And you'll see at the bottom the strategic plan goals that are met with these investments. There are areas in District 2 that have fairly dense development, particularly in terms of some mobile home parks and those sorts of things that basically don't have adequate fire protection. There are no hydrants that are within the distance that need to be. So we feel like this is a safety issue as well as a development incentive. The Mrl Trestle Project, once again, we're working with MRL. We've got an RFP out to hire a firm or a team to do feasibility and figure out how we do this in a way that it becomes an effective part of the trail system and also can be used for rail should that occasion arrive. And we've estimated that at $3.5 million. I think that's probably high, but we wanted to be on the conservative side.
Ellen, I'm
yes.
going to, you said you take questions throughout and it is a long presentation, so I'm just going to jump in real quick. Regarding the California Street build out, which we've needed for decades, and I know you've worked on it, and it's such a large project because of the engineering that needs to happen in there. And maybe this is a public works question, but to what degree are we trying to get that queued up so that it's one of those shovel-ready projects for when those federal funds periodically trickle down? I mean, is that is that part of the strategy on the California Street build out if we aren't going to have TIF capacity for it? Can you
Well,
speak to that?
we have used TIF funds to basically design that project to a pretty extensive degree, because what we were trying to do was understand, as development happens along that street, where do we put the curb, gutter, and sidewalk so that it's compatible with what ultimately happens to the street. And so I think we're probably positioned pretty well right now to go ahead and apply for funding for that, because
Go ahead.
just because the degree of engineering that's already been done. I mean, we have to create bid documents, obviously, but the real design pieces are behind us.
Great. So it sounds like we've been able to create the foundation so that if there's options in the future, either through private development or federal money programs or whatever is out there, we can hopefully plug in. That's about where you got it.
Well, or a combination of TIF funding and impact fees and whatever else we have available. But there's, with the other priorities, there's not adequate TIF capacity to fund that whole thing.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
I'm not sure what I just did. There we go. Okay, so the other is the river and the riverbank improvements, and that's that stretch of river kind of between around the stadium, California Street Bridge, the West Broadway Island. We've programmed about $5.4 million in TIF funds, which would be supplemented by other funds because it is a huge project, and I think Trout Unlimited National is going to help us manage that and design it. And we've got a lot of other partners on board. It's being handled primarily through Public Works and Mobility at this point. Land banking, totally opportunistic, much like, we haven't targeted properties that we would buy at this point, but if we are able to, say, get Missoula Water relocated to Scott Street, then that opens up a huge redevelopment possibility. And there's some properties along there that we would probably want to consolidate with the Missoula Water property. They've already bought 2 pieces on either side of them, but there are a couple more that would be attractive. And once again, the Bitterroot Trail Lighting Project, we've got about $625,000 programmed for that in Urban Renewal District 2. Later on, you'll see a large appropriation in District 3. Because that runs through both districts. And then this is the California Street Project. And the cost estimates that we have are old enough now that they're certainly not reliable. And so it's to be determined at this point. Some examples of committed projects that are in our budget already. The police facility on Catlin Street. Of course, we helped pay for the purchase of that. But we've also approved an expenditure of $233,000 for renovations that needed to take place in that building. This is the Missoula County Election Complex. We have approved a total of $726,000 to renovate those 2 buildings that are on the property. 400 and some of that have been spent, or almost 400,000 redoing the large brown building to the south. And there's still $233,700 left in the budget to complete that if and when the county decides what they're going to do with the office building. This is a really exciting project. It's kind of between 1st and 2nd Avenues on the south side of the river, right on the trail. It's called Bissinger Place. It's a combination of mixed use. It's going to have commercial in there. It's going to have, I think, multifamily and for sale units. It's a historic. It's a reuse of a historic building. Those old warehouses are significant, and they'll be preserved and enhanced and then added to. And this is, I think, a project that meets a lot of the goals that we've hoped we could achieve in the city. So we're pretty excited about that. The money we're spending on that is public infrastructure, by and large, as it is with most of these projects. So any questions in District 2? Okay, seeing none, we'll jump down to District 3. This is, and just to back up real quick on District 2, the clock is ticking pretty quickly on that district, and it will sunset June 30 of 2031. So we don't have much time left in that district. 3 also have,
Oh, go ahead, Ellen. I
No,
had a
go-
question, but I was just gonna say, yeah, so this is the district that's gonna sunset the soonest. So I love the 9-year exit plan. And I just wanted, if you could speak a little bit about, you touched on it, but I just wanted you to expand on the fact that frankly, if you go back to that slide where you have the priorities, how so many of those touch on or facilitate or feed into affordable housing, because under MRA, we can't build the brick and mortar affordable housing buildings, correct? But we can build different components that help that equation work along with land banking. So could you just do a little wrap up on how because affordable housing frankly is emphasized, but we don't really see it as a tile there. Does that make sense?
Sure. And I think, the utility and the sidewalk work that we're doing certainly supports all kinds of housing, affordable being one of them. And then the land banking is the biggest piece of that. If an affordable housing project is publicly owned, like by the housing authority, like Bellagio, we can actually put TIF funds into bricks and mortar. And we did that with that project we paid for the majority of the cost of that retaining wall that had to go up against the interstate, for instance. And that's clearly part of the building, not something we could pay for if it was a private entity like Blue Line or a Chodo like Homeward. But the other thing that we're working with right now is that there was a change in state statute in the very tail end of the last session of the legislature, where they added, we think, the ability for us to spend TIF money on bricks and mortar for workforce housing. We're working through some policy around that, as is every other city in the state that has tax increment financing districts. Bozeman actually has an active project that they're trying to figure out how to utilize those funds for. So that may be yet another tool. It's not going to get the very low income. It'll be 80 to 120% of AMI probably, but that's the segment that's just left out of any federal subsidies. So we're trying to work through that. So there may be other tools out there for affordable housing.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that and actually and correcting me on that. It's really MRA is our big tool, but people they just kind of hear these surface labels, not realizing the complexities of how it goes into making those equations work. And there's a lot of different ways that you do it, and it's complicated and it's opportunistic. I mean, stuff has to walk through the door that is going to work. But thanks for that.
Well, and there's no reason you should have known about the workforce housing. It is brand new information in the world of government anyway, brand new.
Great.
We didn't just find out yesterday. It was a couple of months ago, but still. So we'll jump forward to Urban Renewal District 3. It also has a clock ticking on it. It will sunset in 2040. So we've got some cushion there. And it's a district with a lot of depth. We've got at this point, after debt service, $12 million in excess of $12 million of funds available. We have budgeted projects for half of that. We have committed funds, which are literally committed of $4 million, which leaves an uncommitted balance of about $5 million going into FY23. And it's got a bonding capacity of almost 40 million. So as we look at these really ambitious projects like the Brooks Corridor and developing that as a transit-oriented development corridor and putting bus rapid transit down the center of it, it's pretty daunting until you look at the amount of money that we can bring to the table as a match for federal funding. We've already gotten a planning grant through the RAISE program, through FTA, Federal Transit Administration, where they funded everything we asked for, which tells me that this project is being looked at favorably by the federal government. So we've once again, just like in District 2, we committed during the recession to building out the sidewalk network in District 3. We're really nearing completion on that. We've got a lot of remnants, and that's pretty much what we're working on now. It's about $340,000 budgeted in this year's budget. Strategic goals the same as in 2, safety and wellness and community development and livability. It's amazing how putting in sidewalks transforms a street and a neighborhood. And it's really made a difference in those areas that we've gone into. MRL property remediation, we're still dealing with some cleanup issues there and trying to get that completely off of the radar with DEQ. We've got about almost $74,000 budgeted this year to assist. It supplements brownfields money that's being used to completely remediate that site so that we can develop the northern 7 to 8 acres that has not been touched yet, where we've had the emergency winter shelter the last 2 winters. And this is the MRL property. And of course, we built the MRL park there, which has been extremely popular, and we have the majority of the site still left to develop. This is the Brooks project I alluded to.
We have a hand raised. Can you hang on a sec? We'll just do them as we go through. Ms. Anderson.
Thanks so much, Gwen. Ellen, I'm curious on the, it does seem to me with the MRL property, it's a 2-part, there's the cleanup needed, but then kind of what is the hope that once we do that, that property would be available for what kind of redevelopment, and how can we, through MRA, play a part in that?
So I think our vision for this from the beginning was to try to create a mixed use, primarily residential project that mixed incomes and types of housing. And we kind of beat ourselves to it with the Scott Street project, which we'll talk about in a little while. But we wanted to create a model for how you do all those things together, and it can be replicated in other locations. So I think the process we will go through will be, in all likelihood, similar to the process that we went through when we partnered with Rivara to do the Scott Street property. And we'll work with Missoula Economic Partnership to help identify viable partners for that. And then we will have those folks, in conjunction with the city, go through a public process that lets the neighborhood weigh in on what they want to see there. What are their needs? What should we be targeting, just like we did on Scott Street. So it'll be a very public process that leads to a proposed design and developers.
May I have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
Great. Well, and I'm wondering if this would be a good place, I mean, with what you just said, in regards to the new legislative changes, where if it's the, kind of missing middle 80% to 120% AMI, that we can have more hands-on in terms of bricks and mortar, if this might be a good opportunity to do something like that, because this is such an ideal property for mixed use housing.
Yeah, I think so. I do believe that, and it's in the district that really has the capacity to make enough of an investment to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited. Yeah, sorry, no, not. Thank you so much. It's really exciting, and especially with the need for workforce housing. So glad you guys are working on this. Thanks. Sorry.
And it's not simple, so it's going to take some time. This is the transformation of the Brook Street corridor. As I said, we got a large planning grant. We have a $50,000 match in our budget for that planning grant. I believe Mountain Line also contributed a similar amount, maybe a little bit less. But so the vision here is to actually, we're going to have to buy right away north of Paxson. We need to get it wide enough that we can maintain two travel lanes for traffic and accommodate all the turning movements, and run a center lane transit up and down Brooks, which we think will be absolutely transformed. Well, we know it's going to be absolutely transformative. We have the capacity to do it. If we can get the federal funding, this may be our one shot to really make a huge difference in Urban Renewal District 3, because the spinoff from investments like this you can't even quantify them. I mean, this is the sort of thing that transformed areas of Portland and other cities. So we're pretty excited about this. A lot of people were doubting our ability to get anywhere with it until we got that $850,000 grant. And I think it made believers of a few people.
It is super exciting, Ellen. I'm really, really excited about that. But
well, and when you've got the master plan, the Midtown master plan going on simultaneously with the real nuts and bolts design and planning for the corridor, it couldn't be better.
Yeah, it's a huge game changer.
This project is another one that's committed. The board approved just over $300,000 to help implement part of the city's Greenway system right there between Trimper's Shopping Center and the plaza that they just finished a couple of years ago. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic back and forth between those two, with people parking at Albertsons and walking across the street to get to the new businesses that are over there. And so we're going to fund implementation of a portion of that greenway that'll make that situation a whole lot better for pedestrians and for drivers. These are some of the aspirational projects. Once again, Bitterroot trail lighting. We don't have that budgeted yet, but I think we will as soon as we know what year we're going to do it in. We've got the water main network program, same commitment as in District 2 to leave 3 with the water system built out. And an example of that is that we spent quite a bit of money on a water line extension that allowed Onyx Maps to do the 2 buildings that they have in that district, because there was no water service to that would support a multi-story building. It may not have been any water service, period. I can't remember. But once again, land banking, once again, opportunistic. I think the opportunities in District 3 are going to be almost endless as we start to get into this. All you have to do is look at the amount of asphalt and you can see housing popping out of the ground. And then the RAISE grant to implement the Brooks Corridor project, we figure we'll need probably a $10 to $15 million local match to make it competitive. With the bonding capacity that we have in this district, we can do that. And I think that really increases our odds of being able to implement that really ambitious project, which we think is $50 to $70 million investment. Once again, the Bitterroot trail lighting project. This is the trail with no lights, obviously. The water project got $500,000 budgeted for that. We've got, so let's go back. Any questions on 3? We've got a lot of eggs in one basket on that in that district, and we're heavily invested in the master planning process. We are the major funder for that.
Yeah. Great, not seeing any questions, so let's keep going.
Okay, let's go to Front Street. Once again, once you remove the debt service from the revenue stream, we've got total available funds of about $1.5 million. We've got $900,000 budgeted and or committed. So we don't have a big balance in that for walk through the door projects. We've got just over $500,000, but we do have bonding capacity in that district of $8.2 million. And I believe that our FY23 revenues increased a little bit in that, about $150,000, we think. So that helps. Committed projects, the front and main conversion, finishing out the engineering on that. I've got cost to be determined because we've got an amendment to that engineering contract, because we've expanded the scope of this significantly to take into account, for instance, the impact of Riverfront Triangle development, so we can work through those issues with MDT on the intersection of Broadway and Orange Street. But we are committed to finishing out that, how much will come out of there are 3 districts that are funding that engineering because it impacts 3 districts. That's Front Street, Riverfront Triangle, and Hellgate. And we just haven't worked through the splits yet, which is why you don't have a number there. Okay. This is the building that is being renovated by the Sippies right now, which is right next door to Radius Gallery. It'll be called Relic. It's going to be a really cool addition to downtown. And we're funding improvements in the public right-of-way. And maybe I think just improvements in the public right of way to the tune of about $94,000. Wren Hotel obviously has been under construction for quite a long time. We've got just over $500,000 in curb gutter, sidewalks, street trees, etc. And also improvements to the alley, which allowed them to go up an additional floor as we've faced over and over in downtown with all the overhead utilities that are in the alleys. It's not unusual for a building not to be able to go up more than 2 stories max because they can't meet the separation requirements. So putting those utilities underground in the alleys are what allows things like the Merck Hotel, the AC Hotel, the Wren, the banks that have gone up, office buildings, et cetera. So it's just something we're going to have to contend with in the downtown area for years. I think the Wren should open this fall. And it's really a very transformative project as you look down Main Street.
A raised hand by Heidi West. Heidi?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is maybe more of a comment, but I was wondering, I guess there haven't been any affordable housing projects, I think, in the last year that would show up in this district. But I was wondering if it was possible maybe for next year to add something like total value of affordable housing leveraged in each district. Because I know in this Front Street district, obviously Lee Gordon Places was supported by the MRA, which was a minimal investment really on the scale of some of these projects, but it leveraged about $2 million. And I think that would be a really useful metric to have maybe in each district.
Sure, we can do that.
Thank you. Sorry, not a question.
Well, and if I could just make a comment, I think if you look historically at the investment of TIF funds in affordable housing in the downtown, it's pretty significant when you look at things like the Palace, and I mean they're all over the place, and there's TIF money in almost all of them.
Well, and I agree, and even in the district, the Scott Street district, the North Reserve Scott Street district, the MRA investment is leveraging like over $50 million, I think, currently. And that's, I think that gives a really great illustration of what a small investment of TIF does overall for the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Good
Yeah,
suggestion.
I think that's a great comment, Heidi. I hear from people are like, well, what's Missoula doing for affordable housing? And it's frankly, that's a very simplistic label for a complex issue, and there's all different sorts of things that feed into that issue. And I think that characterization of leveraging what that translates to is super important. And I'm sure that Macy is listening to all of this. So, okay, I had another hand raised, Ellen, before you continue on. All right, we had, did I have another one? Yeah, Stacy. Stacy.
Thanks so much. Sorry to keep asking questions, but I think that these are really interesting projects. And I know, Ellen, specifically, you and I talked about this particular project. And I know it's not reflected here on the slide, but I'd just love for you to comment on, this was an abandoned hotel that just was sitting there, and what it was bringing in for property taxes was something very low. And with this minimal investment, the amount of money that it will now be bringing into the district is significant, similar to the AC Hotel property. I mean, that was, a property that wasn't really generating a lot of money. And so, I mean, to kind of push back on the commentary of like, well, this is, welfare for big hotels, which we know it's not because it goes to specific things, but then it generates a pretty substantial increment that then we can leverage to do other things. If you could talk about that, I think it's really informative of kind of like how MRA, with these investments turns around and leverages so much more dollars.
Yeah, I mean, there is that, and that's obviously a very important point, because we don't have money to spend on things like affordable housing or parks or trails or water main extensions or any of those things if we don't have that significant private investment. And if investing TIF funds in those projects in the public infrastructure piece of it allows them, and in the alley and undergrounding of the utilities allows them to add that additional floor to the building, there's even more value brought to the district and ultimately to the total tax base. You're also getting commercial underneath, which will, add to what's going on in that part of downtown and add to the increment as well. So And I think the corner of Main and Patty, once all of this construction is done and we can do something over where the CenturyLink building is going to be the coolest intersection in downtown. We'll have the curb extensions, we'll have the landscaping, we'll have street trees, and we'll have the appropriate pedestrian scale lighting.
Great. And a lot of people staying in that hotel, using all of the downtown businesses. Lots of good economic
Exactly.
development going on there.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised, so back to you, Ellen.
So next project, the public library, our total commitment was $500,000. We've been paying that $75,000 a year. So we have $75,000 in this year's budget to, and that really, according to the powers that be over there, that is the money that allowed them to add that top floor to the library, and it's a fantastic space.
Mm.
So we're proud that we were a little bit of a part of that. Some of the aspirational projects that we have ahead of us are the Payne or the old library block. We are in the early stages of embarking on a public process and how we're going to, as a city, attract the kind of developers and what kind of development we want there. There will be a public process involved in this, and I'm sure a lot of discussion. We have a great foundation in the downtown master plan, but this will allow the public to really drill in and figure out what we want on that really significant block between Front and Main. And then we've got some missing Riverfront Trail connections that we would, and this is the old Payne Library block, obviously. And we've got some Riverfront Trail connections that we need to continue to work on, been working on for decades, especially around Kiwanis Park. If any of that property along the river redevelops, we hope we'll be in a position to get the Riverfront Trail to continue along the river instead of in this Warniff, which we created 17 years ago, I guess now, that actually gets you from the trail at the Holiday Inn through to the formal trail at Kiwanis that continues on to the university and other places. Any questions on Front Street?
Not seeing anything. Nope. Go ahead, Ellen.
All right, Riverfront Triangle. So we've got a little bit of money in that district, not much because nothing's happened there. The one thing that's fueling the district is the new Stockman Bank on Broadway and on the corner there. And so we've got total available funds of just over $700,000. We've got some committed, so we've got about over 600,000 in there. But we know the redevelopment of that is going to require bonding, and it's going to be complicated. We do have a new group of developers that seem to have a pretty strong interest in redeveloping not only the city-owned property, but the entirety of what was city-owned, what is city-owned, and what is owned by private ownership down to the empty lot next to what was Taco John's. So those two properties are not in this, but it's a very aggressive program. It still gets the hotel, it still gets the retail, it still gets some sort of a community center performance venue, and it gets housing and office buildings. So we're excited that there's the potential for a master developer for the whole thing. We think that's important for it to develop correctly. We had that at one time, and then they backed off, and then it got split into pieces, and then but now we're looking at one cohesive development, which is with the parking requirements there and all that parking that needs to go underground along the Riverfront Trail. It's going to be important to get all that in the ground first and then build on top of it, almost like a podium. So this is once again the main and front conversion is impacted by this. So a portion of that increased engineering costs will be covered by that excess that's in Riverfront Triangle right now. And then our aspirational projects for the last 35 years, development of the Riverfront Triangle. Hopefully this will be the one. And then we've got, once again, got some Riverfront Trail connections that are missing, that we've worked on for decades, and we will continue to work on, and that's connecting back to the west toward Imagination and Brewing in the West Broadway Island, those projects. Any questions there?
Not seeing any. No, but that's exciting news, and we'll see. We'll see what happens with Riverfront Triangle.
Okay, so North Reserve Scott Street. This is we've got a lot going on in this district, and not a lot of revenue or not a lot of excess funding. But you know, we I think in that district we saw about a $200,000 increase. We think in taxable TIF revenue, so that will help out once again. And we have, as of July 1, it should be, we've got just over $10 million in bonding capacity. We will probably be coming to you in the near future with a request to bond the infrastructure that's needed for the Scott Street project that was facilitated by our purchase of the 19 acres from Scott Street Partners. So that bonding capacity is important there. Exciting project that we've got going on as a result of that investment in buying the 19 acres from Scott Street Partners is we've got a development team that's doing basically two different things. This is a kind of aerial rendering of the market rate mixed use apartment development. It's going to have north of 220 units in it, I believe, and about in excess of 25,000 square feet of commercial space. And that includes a daycare facility. That was one of the requirements of the MOU that the city, or the letter of intent that the city did with Rivara, who's kind of the master developer here. This is the whole site. This is what you just looked at the rendering of. This is that big green courtyard, and there's underground parking under that, which allowed us to not have so much surface parking. This will be owned by a community, will be given to a community land trust, and will be permanently affordable workforce housing. These buildings are condos. These buildings are townhomes. And this is, we're working on this possibly being some sort of a live-work type of unit, series of units. You may remember from the letter of intent that the requirement was a minimum of 70, I believe, permanently affordable workforce housing units. We are going to exceed that, and we're not sure by how much yet. Numbers are still moving around, but it'll probably be north of 80. So that's pretty exciting.
Great news.
A lot of housing, yeah. And MR, what we'll be asking for from council and relative to bonding is to build Charlotte Street Extension, which is part of the street network that's identified in the North Reserve Scott Street Master Plan, to extend Shakespeare, and to build Palmer basically as a parking lot / street. It will be built to street standards, but will be a parking area that's owned by the city. So this is moving along pretty well, and we're narrowing down on architectural drawings to the degree that contractors can start giving us some real pricing on that. It's been a really successful project to date. Rivara's done a great job. They did a wonderful public process. The public continues to be engaged in this. We do have a pretty active neighborhood on the other side of Scott Street, and that's been to the benefit of this project from day one. Scott Street Village is a project that Edgel Builders did. There are 3 phases to that. The first 2 phases were basically single family and townhomes that were priced at workforce housing levels, but there was no mechanism contemplated that would keep them at that level. So it's not on community land trust property or anything like that. But I think with 30 units in phase 1, 24 units in the second phase. Phase 3 is under construction right now, and that's 70 plus multifamily units. These are the buildings that are under construction right now, and that'll be the final phase of Scott Street Village. The TIF investment actually extended the street and put in water and sewer and other utilities as needed. This year's budget has almost $75,000 in it that is committed to infrastructure improvements associated with this particular project. So it's a really neat development, and we're pretty proud of our investment in it. And it's
I've got a raised hand here from Mike Nugent. We can go to Mike.
Thanks, and thanks, Ellen. You mentioned at workforce rates, but then that there is no kind of permanent guarantee on those workforce rates on this project. And I know that's kind of a question that's come up a lot in council. It's really probably a bigger discussion for another day, but I'm kind of curious, why wasn't a tool like that used in this project? Is it because that the right sort of tool doesn't exist, or was that part of a conversation with the developer, or can you expand on that at all?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the right sort of tool didn't exist to make enough of an investment in this to require some permanence about the cost of those units. If we're able to work our way through this new language in state statute that defines workforce housing as infrastructure, then I think we can bring enough to the table to make a big difference in that. I don't know that you would require every unit to be capped. I think a mix is probably preferable, at least in my perspective it is, so that we don't have this group of people over here and another group of people 2 blocks away. It's all a neighborhood. But we didn't have the tools to do that at the time, Mike.
That makes sense. And I agree with you that I don't think that it would be ideal to do the whole project, especially when you've got the private developer coming to the table and being part of that conversation. You kind of asked my second question, but I was going to say, what can we do to help you develop some clarity around a policy like that, just as part of the conversation?
Well, I think once we work through kind of the legal analysis and the practical on the ground analysis, we will bring something, we'll bring something to the council.
Perfect. Thank you.
We're happy Bozeman's going first.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Bellagio, you're all aware of, that's permanently affordable LIHTC project, 200 units, well underway in terms of construction. We've got about $1.3 million invested in that or committed to it. A lot of that was that retaining wall that had to be built up against the interstate to even allow these buildings to be built there. They would have had to do far fewer units had they not been able to capture that dirt and get the funding from tax increment to pay for that to happen. We may well, when we come to you and ask for you to approve bonds to build the infrastructure needed for this project, Charlotte.
Actually, before you go on, we had a raised hand. Heidi, did you have something you wanted to ask, or no? Just a second, Ellen.
Sorry, I keep losing my unmute button. I just was hoping you could repeat why it is that you can, I know you said it earlier in the presentation, but why it is you can invest more money in this project. I just feel like it's super important. And then I just wanted to put on the record, I guess that I think this $1.3 million is leveraging about, is it 64 million or something like that? Ellen, do you know the whole cost of the project?
I don't remember. I could look it up, but I'm sure it's gone up since the paperwork we have.
Yeah, I think originally it was supposed to be like a $54 million project. And I think now it's over the last couple of years, it's gone up considerably. So I don't know the final number either.
Yeah, I don't know. But we're considering asking to fold this 1.3 million into bonding, which will probably be about 3 million for the streets around the Scott Street project, the Rivar project, so that we free up $1.3 million in cash in that district, which then allows us to have a lot more flexibility about what we can try to attract, or, if property becomes available that makes sense for the city to buy, we still have the capacity to do that, or we could even pay cash for it, which is a lot quicker. So just trying to keep our flexibility as flexible as possible.
Great. Did that answer your question, Heidi?
I just wanted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think I did. No, the reason we were able to invest in this project is that ultimately this is owned by the Missoula Public Housing Authority. That is a public entity. This is a publicly owned building. we can invest in publicly owned buildings like public library, like the county courthouse, the county elections building, the police facilities, on and on and on. Hellgate High School when it was in District 1.
Great. Thank you. Okay, Mirta.
Ellen, thanks for all the information. I guess I was gonna ask you later as just in general terms, but this actually gives me a good opportunity to better understand. So when there's a TIF investment, it's a percentage of the total cost of the project. Does that change if it's a public project versus a private project?
Well, I mean, a couple of the metrics that we look at are how long might it take? What percentage of total investment is the public money? Well, in projects like this, it's all public money. So that analysis, it doesn't hold up when we're investing in public projects. The other is how long does it take for the increment from that new project to pay back our investment? Well, these are not tax-paying projects. So, but in all of our private projects, we do that analysis for every project. And what we look for ideally, unless they're extenuating circumstances, is a 10-to-1 ratio of private to public dollars, and a 10-year payback, if you will. So
But for a
and
public
some projects-
project,
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, but for a public project like this one, that ratio is either not, it could be significantly higher, correct?
Oh yeah, we could be paying half the cost. We could be paying quarter of the cost. It's public building, and therefore, but that's dependent on capacity in the district and the importance of the project.
And may I have a follow-up?
Go ahead.
So I've always wondered about this percentage, and wonder if that is set by the state, or is that something that the MRA kind of works within those parameters, and is that at all flexible so that you could increase that percentage in TIF rich URDs, or the URDs like URD3 that has the ability to bond for significantly more? Can that be a tool to motivate people and incentivize developers to invest in those URDs, because they might have the potential to get a greater ratio of TIF investment in their projects?
Yeah, as far as the history lesson, I think my understanding of where this came from, and it's fondly called by staff the rule of 10. It's not in state statute. It was created by the MRA board. It was created kind of as a guide when Urban Renewal District 1 was created, and there was nothing. And the investment had to be really strategic in order to maximize enough new TIF funding coming in to invest in other projects. And obviously it was very successful in that first district, and really held true throughout the life of the district. We did the numbers when that district sunsetted, and what we found was that we had reinvested about $200 million in TIF funding back into the district, and it had leveraged over $20 million in private and other funding. So it was a pretty smart rule. And so, yes, there is the flexibility. It's our own policy. It's not anything that's mandated by state law. And in fact, there are certain projects, for instance, if you have a facade improvement project in District 3, and you also have infrastructure needs, even though the facade grant is capped at 50,000, often that ratio gets skewed because of that. But you're improving the district by improving that building's presence in the district and how it interacts with the district and the streets. And you're also adding typically curb, gutter, sidewalk, widening the sidewalk, street trees, whatever the investment in the public realm is. So those will often exceed that 1-to-10 ratio.
Can I just have one more follow-up?
Go ahead.
Has the MRA consider increasing that ratio for projects that include affordable housing, so that we can provide that incentive, especially in certain districts?
Sure. Yeah, I think we can do that. And, I think, our investment in Casa Loma is the project over there on South and Stevens is evidence of that. I don't think we exceeded the ratio because that's a very, very expensive project, but it's a sizable investment in the infrastructure in that district, which is allowing them to maximize units, and they have committed to 20% of the rental units being permanently affordable.
Yeah, I think that could be a good incentive to meet our strategic goals of affordable housing if we can, have a little more wiggle room with that ratio.
Yeah, I think we already do. I mean, every project's not going to come in 10-1, but if it's a worthy enough project, absolutely do it. I mean, this isn't an affordable housing example, but a great example of that is the facade restoration that we funded on the old Radio Central building in the Union Block on Main. I mean, talk about a transformative project.
Yeah.
It's not going to increase taxes enough to matter because all it did was a preservation project. They didn't add square footage or anything, but what an investment in the downtown.
Yeah.
So,
Thanks, Ellen.
sure.
So Ellen, I'm not sure how much more you have, but we do have flexibility today, and how long do you estimate for the remainder of your presentation?
Oh, we're about done.
Okay, then you just keep on going. All right.
All right. So the other thing we're anticipating being a part of in the North Reserve Scott Street area is the relocation of White Pine Park. Parks is currently negotiating to purchase some land or lease some land. I'm not sure how that's going to play out, where we can have a park that is an adequate size for that neighborhood, which the little White Pine Park is not currently. And we need to encroach on that to do the extension of Palmer through there. So we anticipate that there will be TIF funds needed to either help purchase or help develop a new park on Scott Street. And it'll be right basically in front of Bellagio, which is wonderful with those 200 units coming in online. And they will probably have a fair number of kids involved. And this is the preferred location, kind of giving you for the relocation of the park and giving you an idea of scale with that recreational soccer field shown there as an illustrative thing. Once again, that'll go through a very public process led by Parks to determine what components should go in that park and what the neighborhood needs and wants if we're successful in getting the property. So the aspirational projects in that are the Scott Street to Grant Creek Trail along the base of the interstate, I think, and that's going to tie Northside neighborhood and Grant Creek together, which would be a huge addition to our trail system. And once again, land banking.
Heidi had a question.
Sure.
I did. And you might not know the answer to this, but I was wondering a little bit about timing around the transition of the park. Do you know if, I guess, what the ideal scenario is? Would the ideal scenario be that the new park comes online as the other one gets taken out, or would the neighborhood potentially be without a park on that end for a while? Like, do you know what that would potentially look like?
I think the intention right now is that we will keep the park that's there functional. We'll lose some square footage on the north end of it to build the Palmer Street extension, but the rest of it will stay intact. So for instance, one of the things we're wrestling with right now is what do you do about the wells for the irrigation system, because they're where Palmer will go. Yeah, so the intention is to keep that in business and try to get a new park built before you take that completely out, but that could change. So I don't think that decision, that's an ideal. We haven't had to face making the hard decision.
All right, thank you.
But if somebody came along and wanted to do a really cool affordable housing project on what's left of that park, I think we'd have to really think about it. Can we go without a park for a year or two? Or do we have to keep that intact? But that'll be a public discussion and one the council will weigh in on, no doubt. The last district, there's not a whole lot to say about. The Hellgate district, it's what's west of Madison Street down to the far side of, or east of Madison Street, sorry, down to the far side of Missoula College. And there just hasn't been much activity in that district at all. the numbers that you see are generated by property appreciation as much as anything. There hasn't been much investment. But that's not unusual. There wasn't much investment in a lot of these urban renewal districts when they were created. It takes time. It takes 10, 12 years sometimes before you, unless you create a district that you already kind of have a bird in hand. And there's something that is waiting to develop because they want TIF assistance of some kind. So that's got $2.5 million in bonding capacity and a balance of about $1 million. We did lose revenue in that district as a result of the FY23 taxable values. But yeah, like $30,000. So nothing significant. We've got one committed project in that, and we've got front and main conversion because this district is impacted by that. And so with part of the funding for the additional engineering will come out of that district. And then the famous railroad crossing wayside horn, we've had a lot of complaints over the years about the train horns. This is gonna quell those complaints. MRA's got $200,000 budgeted for that. Aspirational project, we've got a bunch of riverfront trail connections we need to deal with down through there. Affordable housing development is, I think there's the potential for that. And once again, land banking is opportunistic. Just a quick note that we've added a communications specialist. As you know, we've gotten a lot of stuff done with respect to, we had a communications plan created for us with 6 Pony Hitch in 21. We've got a new graphic, which we think is pretty nice, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about. So these are just some of the things that we're doing to kind of get the word out there and make our presence known in somewhere other than this project or that project, so that the public has a better understanding of what TIF is, how it can be used, and how the city of Missoula has chosen to use it. With that, I'm done.
Great. Especially thanks for all this awesome information and asking our questions as we pepper you with them. And I appreciate the communications wrap up at the end. And I just wanted to say that, about 4 to 6 weeks ago, my 90-year-old dad gave me the MRA communications graphic that someone had given him at Coffee Club. And he said this was really important and really well done, and that I ought to know about it. And I said, thanks, this is great. I said, I agree. I think it's really well done. And he said, well, this is just fantastic. I had no idea all this was going on in Missoula. This is a really good program, Gwen. So I just wanted to pass that along. And I think every coffee club should have their own graphic from MRA. So I hope you continue to spread it around town. It's been super well received. Are there any other questions from council regarding MRA, their budget? There's lots going on, and I think the priority of affordable housing is being highlighted, and it takes a period of time. It's a slow moving machinery to kind of get things pointed in that direction. We've always had a focus on affordable housing, but of course we have an even greater focus now. And I have seen MRA, I feel like you have been pivoting for the last few years very intentionally, Ellen, in that direction to really make a difference. Mrta.
Along the same lines, I just wanted to say thank you. I think the MRA has done a really good job in being intentional with some of the investments. I think a lot of people don't realize that in order to create that TIF base, you have to invest in some of these more money-making, if you will, projects, and that allows us to have the funds to do projects like affordable housing, parks, trails, infrastructure. So I think that it's a fine balance that you got to have of the types of investments. And I think the reason we have funds in some URDs is because of that intentional investment, and I appreciate that.
Great. Okay, any other questions?
Just one comment. I think what Mrta said is spot on. I mean, that's the thing we don't think about a lot as we focus on affordable housing is what are the infrastructure needs to make that happen? What are the amenities that need to happen to make that a livable neighborhood? And so, when I think about the land banking, I'm not only thinking about affordable housing, I'm thinking about the park that's needed in that neighborhood when you add 200 or 400 new units over a period of time. Or what are the trail connections that need to go there to make it a truly walkable, livable neighborhood? So it's much bigger than just building the housing that people live in. You have to give them the amenities that make it livable.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen, and to your staff. And I know that your staff has been listening and sending out emails answering specific questions. So counselors, if you can take a look at that for more details if you need it. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next on our agenda today, we had some time with Missoula Police Department. So let me pull this up. I think we've got Chief White here to answer any additional questions. We were trying to juggle the schedule last week and didn't have enough time with police. So glad you're able to join us today and answer any questions. So I know that Daniel Carlino had questions, but he had a last minute issue that he had to attend to and could not make the meeting today. But if anyone else has questions, since we have the police chief here, please raise your hand. And while you're thinking of those questions, I actually will throw a few out. And I think it's budget based, or actually we'll go to Heidi. Actually, let's go to Heidi first, since she does have a question. I have some questions, but I'll hold them until we've made sure everyone else has a chance here. Go ahead, Heidi.
Sorry, I didn't ask ahead of time about this, but I was wondering, I feel like we talk a lot about, I guess, patrol officers and their time and public interactions, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more specifically to the detectives in our department and maybe their workload and how that workload has, I assume it's increased over the past, let's say like 5 years. Just a little bit to that capacity and the sorts of cases they see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. And I really have to extend my thanks to Captain Collier for covering for us last week. I appreciated him stepping up at the last minute and taking care of that. As far as our detectives go, we have, I'm looking through our annual report now to give you exact numbers of our caseload, but we have 20 detectives assigned, and they range everything from general crimes to our special victims unit that handles all of the crimes against persons. We also have detectives assigned to various task forces that handle task force business, whether it be drug related or attached with FBI Safe Streets to handle major crime stuff. So we have not increased the size of our detective division for a lot of years. It has remained steady. The unfortunate thing is sometimes we have to leave vacancies. If we experience vacancies in patrol, that is our primary function, to respond to those calls for service. So sometimes we run short. For example, this last year, we were unable to transfer two personnel into detectives. So instead of having 20, they ran with 18. We're finally able to, now that we're starting to get back to full staff and capacity, we're still starting to be able to move folks into the detective division. So that's remained steady. Their workload has increased, and I'm trying to make, here we go. Just in our aggravated assaults and serious violent felonies, there's been a marked increase in that. So, in our aggravated assaults in 2019, we experienced 221. In 2020, it was 308. And in 2021, it was 442. So it has doubled in 2 years. So each one of those cases gets assigned to one of our detectives. So their caseload continues to grow.
Did you have any follow-up, Heidi? Are you good?
Well, that seems like a real disconnect, having caseload potentially double depending on what category you're talking about, and then holding the the staffing the same and even being understaffed for the last 2 years. So I just, or not last 2 years, but not being able to, be 2 detectives short. I just wanted to, I guess that seems like that could be challenging. That's all.
It is very difficult, but we have to maintain our uniform patrol strength in order to respond to those initial calls for service. So it just unfortunately means that our detectives take on more cases than their normal caseload.
And that's a great segue actually for what I was going to ask you, which was in the last year or two, my sense of time is so off with the pandemic. But the city did the staffing study for police, and then you had some time to implement it. May not have been perfect because I know you're always still closing some gaps there, but could you just speak to your thoughts at this point on, with the staffing study results and implementing that, what you're seeing in terms of what difference it's making, how it's working in the community? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, in 2020, the city, in conjunction with the association, sponsored and paid for a complete staffing study to take a look at whether or not the city police department is appropriately resourced for the city. And that goes beyond calls for service. What it does is it takes a complete look at the workload of an officer, because as I mentioned, with some of our violent crime increasing, those complex crime response take more resource from us and require more work hours to complete. So yeah, the overall numbers may dip down, but it takes more resource for us to do that. So that study was a holistic approach and looking at those numbers. And the conclusion of the report was that the city is adequately and properly resourced for the number of officers that we have, both in the detective division and patrol division and admin division. But where we were lacking was in the efficiency of our schedule, and that we could implement change in the way that we schedule our officers on patrol in order to best maximize the resource that we do have. So in February of 2021, we implemented all the recommendations from that report. And that required us to sit down with the association, develop MOUs, because we changed the way that we schedule our officers and the amount of hours they work during their given shift. So that took a change to the CBA. So we successfully negotiated with the association to implement that effective in February of 21. So we've had just a little over a year. And what I can say is that when we are fully staffed and fully resourced in our patrol division, it works very well. We have officers that we have shift overlaps during the peak times of our calls for service during the day. And then we taper off our uniform strength during the hours when we are no longer getting those high call volumes. So we have matched the workload curve to available resource, and it works very well. The days that we have, a shortage of staff, either due to vacancies or, FMLA leave, military leave, we have to backfill that with overtime in order to make sure that we maintain those ratios to maintain that schedule. So it's important for us to maintain all of the available resource we have in order to keep hiring personnel.
Great, thank you. And I see that Dale Bickle has joined us. Dale, did you want to add to this?
Well, there's a follow-up aspect to that study that maybe Chief White, you could talk to. While that study, it really talked about the responses and our capacities relative to patrol and detectives, but it didn't, I just want to make sure that it didn't talk about command staff and the level of resource we need in order to manage that size of the department. And so that's kind of outside of that. And maybe, because I don't want to lose sight of the position. I mean, it's not included in the mayor's budget, but the need to build the adequate command staff infrastructure in PD. And maybe you could touch on that, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dale. So it was directed, the report and study was directed at the line level of getting resource to the public. but what it did not address the chain of command or span of control. And in the last few years, I have come to the mayor's office and to city council asking for additional supervisory resource to make sure that we've had some span of control to get that narrowed back down so we can properly supervise what's going on in the field. And we've been fairly successful in that. And we've added some of that supervisory first line level. But what we are now finding is that there's still a gap near the command staff level. And as you saw in our presentation, our request for the commander position would be to help offset the workload of our patrol division commander. Our patrol division commander has the lion's share of work, and it gets that job gets so busy with the day in and day out of response that we can't start forecasting and working on long range plans, and some of that includes our work with ACS and our homeless outreach and some of those other emerging issues that we're having within the city. So we kind of get stuck behind the power curve from a management level oversight of some of that stuff, and so that's why we asked for that commander level position in order to take over some of that day in, day out routine work to allow the captain to start working a little bit more proactively in some of these emerging issues that we deal with.
Great, thanks. That's really helpful to hear. And I think the staffing study was a really smart strategic thing to do to give us a good holistic, I think you would use the word holistic, and that's exactly what a good holistic picture of what we should be doing, what's the best practice, and how do we make it work. And then we just have to somehow manage our revenue to get the right resources in the right places. Separate issue there. But I had a question to kind of follow up on that. You know, we've been able to tip up the mobile support team and trying to provide these other alternative tools as we're seeing our complex life in communities across America, just having needs for different intervention types of tools. And I'm really glad we've been able to do that in Missoula. There can be a perception sometimes, well, because we did that, we don't need the police as much. But first of all, just clarify this for me. Every time the mobile support team goes out on a call, police have to go initially also to make sure that the situation is stable and everybody's safe. So that's part one of my question. The second part is, if we do free up police resources, not having to stay on a mental health call, and mobile support team can take it, and that can be a lengthy call sometimes. I would imagine, and I want you to speak to, it's not like we just have a finite amount of police calls out there and it's cut and dried. There's a continuum, and we prioritize what we respond to, and to the degree that there is better staffing or we free up resources, we can go down the ladder a little bit and be more proactive in some areas, as well as working on relationship building, which if you're just responding to one crisis after another, you can't do. So could you speak to that a little bit and what you see? How is that issue working in Missoula?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
There. Sorry about that.
What's that?
That was a long question. Sorry.
Yeah, can I object? Compound. So yeah, we work hand in hand with the mobile support team to address people in immediate crisis. And while the program is still gaining in its maturity, and I'm not saying it's immature, but we as staff become more accustomed to dealing with some of our clients that they deal with on a regular basis, until they're comfortable, they want us there for their safety and the safety of the individual they're dealing with. So our response and time on scene is dictated a lot by the personnel of the mobile support team that want us there for their protection. So it does give us opportunity to free up resource a little bit sooner. Mobile support team does some of the transports for folks that are doing voluntary commits. So that's no longer something the police department has to do all the time. We still do it, when need be. But so that does free up some resource that allows us to respond to other calls. I think what we lack sometimes is an understanding that while an officer is on a call, it doesn't mean that the clock stops and no one calls for service. So those calls continue to stack up. So, as resource becomes available, then officers can respond to that next call for service. Or we have to rezone someone. If it's that big of an emergency, then we're pulling resource from another part of the city that's specifically dedicated to that zone to cover somewhere else, which means that we're constantly having to move our officers around the city in order to do that. So it does free up some resource, but it's not the magic bullet that gives us a lot of free time. And just as a frame of reference, our calls for suicidal persons significantly increased in 2021. Just to give you a little historical perspective, in 2019, we responded to 711 suicidal person calls. In 2020, we responded to 677. And in 2021, we responded to 825 suicidal person calls. So unfortunately, our calls for service centered around people in crisis are continuing to increase.
And as for just kind of my second part of the question, where doing more proactive interaction with the community, creating relationships, maybe not having to always respond to a call, but just, like we used to have cops walking the beat and they got to know everybody and there were relationships. Like, how do you see that as a component? To me, that's more proactive and it prevents a lot of bad things from happening. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. And that was addressed in the staffing study that we did, that we've implemented. So the gold standard for community-oriented policing, which is, reactionary time and that proactive time of dealing with the community, it's a 50-50 ratio. And the results of that staffing study and the patrol schedule that we have put in place is designed to get us to that point that officers aren't so saddled with calls for service, that they can get to a place where they are at 50% reactionary, 50% proactive, where they can get out of their cars and engage. I know one of our sergeants just recently, there was a concert in one of the parks in one of the neighborhoods, and one of the sergeants had a few available officers that weren't on call, and they took their lunch break. They went and got lunch and went down and interacted with the public at that concert venue. And it was a very positive experience. And those are things that we are trying to implement and doing the best we can, given what we have.
Great, thanks. Okay, Amber, and then if there aren't any other questions, we'll probably move on to our next presentation, which is the Business Improvement District. So if anybody else has another question, please get your hand raised. All right, so we've got Amber and then Heidi, and I think we'll be done then. But go ahead, Amber.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for this, Chief White, this presentation. I wanted to say that I think that the day in the life of one of your officers that Collier had talked about when he was here really, I think emphasizes exactly what you're talking about with regard to schedule and where things happen and how they're happening. Yeah, it'd be better if it were a little easier to organize, I'm sure. So, I think Gwen asked my question about the mobile support team, but that's always made sense to me, just, not being in law enforcement, but understanding that, social workers are not trained to deal with the things that law enforcement is trained to deal with, and vice versa. So I think it's really a great marriage of those two skill sets. My question, I don't know if this is for you or for Dale, but last week or the week before, whenever the presentation, the police presentation was given, there was some discussion about reallocating police funds to all these other things. And, if we go back to the presentation that was given, there are, and I'm going to flip my, the majority of it is personnel of the police budget. The vast majority is personnel. And so, that is under a unionized contract. And I guess I want the public to understand how those work. And I'm hoping that maybe Dale or Chief White, if you would just speak to how much of the budget is under a unionized contract and how that works. I think that would be helpful for people to understand as we talk about allocating funds.
Dale, I can start with that if you're okay. So 97% of the police department's budget is for personnel, and that is driven by the salary and wages and benefits that are called for in the CBA for our unionized employees. And the remainder of that is called for in, Angela Simonson from the HR director provided information about our non-union staff and the new pay scale with that. So all of that is incorporated into that personnel budget. So any cut to the police department, you would have to assume that 93% of whatever cut is made would come from personnel, because our operating expenses would generally not change. And if they changed, it would be only by the tune of maybe 7% of that cut. So that's the formula that we would have to use in making those difficult decisions and where those cuts would come from. The other piece is there are accounting rules that prevent us from sliding money from general categories to the other. So, every year we have the give back of personnel dollars back into the general fund. And I can't reallocate those dollars to operating expense. They have to stay within that personnel classification. So trying to shuffle where the money we receive becomes difficult because of those accounting rules. So if we take, for example, a $2.5 million cut to the Missoula Police Department, if globally, if you take 93% of that, that's $2.3 million. Our average officer salary with benefits provided for by the city pursuant to the CBA is about $150,000 per officer. So if you divide that up, that would be a 15.5 officer reduction to the police department. And if you take that number, then that makes the department back to its 2007 staffing level. So we would be going back 15 years. If that's just a general number to throw out.
Okay. Dale, did you have something to add to that?
I really don't. I mean, Chief White talking about that they are very much personnel driven. The community, we get to set the level of service related to police services. And so what would have to happen in these things is there would be a reduction of service and kind of a reallocation of the priorities calls. There would be the types of calls that police accept now. I mean, those would decrease. It would just be across the board level of service reduction that would happen.
Thanks. And just to clarify, the $150,000 per officer, that's not their salary. That's all of the benefits and fringe and all of the wraparound, so that they're paid a lesser salary, but that's how much it costs the city. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is not just their salary. That is their salary plus the benefits driven by the CBA and city policy.
Great. And just for the public, CDA stands for?
The collective bargaining agreement, sorry.
CBA side. Thanks. Great. That is helpful. Okay. All right. We do have a couple more questions and then we will move on to our next topic, but this has been a great discussion today. Heidi West.
Thanks. So I guess I have a big question, big picture question. So most of us were on council in the summer of 2020, where there were a lot of asks from the community to essentially defund the police. And I think we didn't do that, but instead diversified the way we could meet the needs of the community and meet the needs of individuals that are in crisis. And I think that we are still hearing that funding the police doesn't reduce crime, but I don't think that we can assume that the inverse is true, so that not funding police would result in a decrease in crime. So I was wondering if you as a department are tracking maybe what is happening in communities that did choose to maybe lower their contribution to police, and what the community-wide results have been. We have, I think, 2 years now, potentially 2 years of data that we could reference. And could use to make funding decisions, and could inform us as elected officials. So I was curious if you had any insight on how that has worked in other communities.
So I get information from the International Association of Chiefs of Police, which is an organization made up of law enforcement executives from across the country and in the world. And in some of the major cities, Austin, for example, Seattle, for example, where they made substantial cuts to the police department budget, which caused them to reduce their number of officers, they experienced an increase in crime. And now those councils have gone back and are trying to increase the budget back into those police departments to be able to hire officers, to take them from the level they were cut to and increase those levels. And I know from articles I've read regarding the Austin, Texas chief of police, that they can't meet that new standard. They don't, that there's been such a catastrophic effect on people's willingness to become police officers in those jurisdictions that they struggle with recruitment and hiring. So they can't meet those demands to hire officers back into those communities. So, and you're now at a new pay level, and in order to get people to apply, they've had to provide extra financial incentives above and beyond what was already that may have existed in order to get folks to apply and come work in those organizations. So it's actually turned out in some cases to be more expensive in the long run, because now you're offering sign-on bonuses, and there's one city that's looking at providing zero interest loans for officers to buy a home in that jurisdiction in order to get people to apply. So,
can I ask a follow-up question, Gwen?
Sure, go ahead.
I was also, and you might not know the answer right now, but I think it's a really interesting question. I was wondering if in the data you see, you have any idea of who, like the demographic of who is being victimized in those communities.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't.
No, okay. I would just be curious to see if who benefited the least in the shift. But if that's not available, maybe I'll do some digging. All right, thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, super interesting question and topic of discussion. And as I've done some research on it, the conversation is so much more complex, and it's really, I think the underpinnings are far more pointed in the direction of if there's investment in housing, in social programs, in education, in the long run, that really pays off, but that takes a huge amount of time and effort and money, and it's not just a quick transactional item that occurs and then our crime goes down. But I think, we just heard from MRA, all the money going into affordable housing. Frankly, I think we have a good public education system in Missoula, mobile support team. I think these are all pieces that feed into that. But it's not a simple quick fix. And in the meantime, you want a good police force that is handling things well, making good judgment calls out there. Okay, enough of me and my soapbox, but Ms. Anderson, and then Ms. Vasika, and then we really do have to wrap this up because we've got other people in the queue for presenting.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief White, for joining us again today. Really appreciate Heidi's question. I think it really, just from my experience, I spent a few years living in Seattle and moved back home to Montana, and just recently was back in Seattle last month, and really was shocked at the level of just how the downtown area has changed. I saw, open use of drugs in daylight that had never, things that had not necessarily happened before that I had noticed when I lived there, and really chatted with several of the friends we still have there, and just how, I do think that there is a direct correlation. And as Gwen has said, it's so much more complicated than just policing, but that does have a major component. My question for Chief White is in regards to the mental health request that your department is making, and just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. I know that was one of the things that you highlighted what seems like a really long time ago in your interview for this position, and I do think that there is a component, I would love for you to talk about it, in the switching and allowing for more of the proactive community policing. I would imagine that it was a positive experience for both the officers and the community to be able to go to that concert and have like a relationship building positive experience that with the community members, and then but also really addressing the mental health. I know that there is that's a major issue in policing, and things that lead to a lot of really good officers feeling burnt out and not being able to stay in the. Would like for you to talk.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, Captain Collier presented the day in the life of one of our officers back in June. That's very powerful. But frame it around this. That is one day in a 20-year career. So that's not, we did this for one day and it doesn't happen again. It is something that happens to our officers every day that they go to work and for the lifetime of their career. So we have to be able to build resiliency in our people in order for them to maintain a healthy lifestyle, a healthy outlook on the profession, and a healthy relationship with the public. So we have really made a concerted effort over the last couple of years in building a variety of programs. You've heard about our peer support program. We've always had a chaplain program, and we have also brought in external trainers to talk about how we deal with our mental health issues and how we handle the stress of crisis that we have to deal with day in and day out, and how you go from a very difficult call for service to something that would be deemed to be routine, and how you recover in the 5-minute drive from where you just left a horrific scene to having to deal with someone, in a routine manner to take a theft report, when you still have this stuff in the back of your mind. So not having the ability to take a break from that can cause long-term mental health issues for our folks. So the reason that we've looked at this application is it's hands-on, it's on your phone. So if you get done with a difficult call for service and you need someone to talk with or be able to check in, you just press the button on the app and you can take care of that confidentially and get the help you need before you have to go deal with something else that's horrific or a routine call for service. So getting our folks that immediate contact to help in order to help them, one, get through their shift, but also get through their career. But the other important piece is that it's not just the officer, it is the officer's family. There's a lot of this stuff that unfortunately we bring home, and being able to provide that resource to our significant others and our family members is critical in helping them understand the roller coaster ride that we run emotionally throughout the day, and that sometimes there's just things that we don't want to talk about at that particular moment. So to give our significant others and families some resource in order to help them understand what the officer is going through, but also help them help the officer through that situation. So it's a very powerful tool, and it is something that we really would like to add and fill that last remaining gap that we have.
Great, thank you. Okay, last question, and then we will let you go, Chief White. Sandra.
Not a question. I just wanted to congratulate you on the really successful National Night Out yesterday. I was able to hit the tail end of it, and it was really cool. It was a lot bigger than last year, and I was really impressed. So good job.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a lot of fun, and it was a great location, and we had a lot of foot traffic of people that just saw it all out there and came by that weren't aware. So it was a wonderful experience.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Good questions, good discussion today. Thank you for coming again this week, Chief White, to just answer additional questions on budget. And we'll be seeing you in the future as we finalize budget in August. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your patience, Business Improvement District people. I appreciate you hanging in there with us. We've got, well, why don't you guys introduce yourselves? We can't see you too well on the screen, but well enough. And then if you've got a presentation to go through. Linda, to you.
Good morning. Yes, I am Linda McCarthy. I am the Executive Director of the Downtown Missoula Partnership. And here with me today is Jack Hall, our Finance Director. And also on the call today is Ellen Buchanan, who is one of the seven members of the Downtown Business Improvement District Board of Directors. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I just have a few comments to make. I assume you have already reviewed the BID budget that was submitted in the spring.
Yep.
Just to give you a brief overview, the Downtown Business Improvement District was created in 2005. So it's a relatively new organization and was recently renewed in 2020 with 75% support from our downtown property owners. The BID is one of 3 organizations under the umbrella of the Downtown Missoula Partnership. The other 2 are the Downtown Association and the Downtown Foundation, which, by the way, raised $1 million for Caras Park last summer. The BID is funded by annual assessments on 640 properties within a defined boundary. That boundary is generally the railroad to the north, Madison Street to the east, the river to the south, although the hip strip is included in the BID boundary, the commercial parcels there. And then it also extends to the corner of West Broadway and Burton Street. Program priorities for the downtown BID are primarily clean, safe, and economic vitality. The maintenance and streetscapes budget, which is 30% of our expenses, covers everything associated with the downtown clean team, garbage and recycling removal from the street cans, graffiti removal, which we're needing some more help with this year, and some of the repairs and maintenance for our downtown decorations. The safety component of our budget contracts with the Missoula Police Department for 2 dedicated full-time police officers to patrol the downtown district 7 days a week. The economic vitality part of our budget covers a variety of different things. So the BID partners with the Downtown Association to help fund general consumer marketing for downtown. As 7% of our budget, our marketing and social media efforts and communications typically focus on transportation, parking, construction, new businesses, attractions, events, projects, and planning. The BID is committed to implementation of the downtown master plan that was updated in 2019. And we allocate a little over $100,000 of our budget for implementation projects. This includes a $50,000 allocation to help cover improvements that we've just completed in Caras Park recently. The BID has also allocated $50,000 of its budget for business development, and the BID is partnering with the Missoula Economic Partnership to improve our coordinated efforts to ensure our business development goals of the master plan are implemented. As one of 3 organizations with the partnership, the BID helps cover some of our administrative costs, approximately 2.5 FTEs, full-time employees in our office. And like many others, we are struggling with staffing as well. And our staffing costs have increased about 23% going towards wages and benefits. So in summary, the BID is funded by property owners in the district. and property owner investment in common area maintenance, planning and implementation, policing, and communications are key to having a vibrant, clean, safe, and forward-thinking city center. We estimate property assessments will increase about 10% due to rising property values. The BID funds programs and projects above what the municipality provides based upon state law. And the downtown BID plays an important role in our community's health and well-being. When your downtown is healthy, typically your community is healthy. So I'm going to pause there. That is what I have to say about our budget. It is a very small budget, about $615,000, and it is funded entirely by assessments. What questions do you have?
Great. Thank you, Linda. It is small but mighty. You guys accomplished so much. And I just kind of, as an overlay, wanted to say that we have, in my opinion, the best downtown in all of Montana. And it doesn't just happen by chance. It happens because of a huge amount of hard work for a lot of people outside of the city. And that's all of the entities that you mentioned, Linda, and you were pivotal in so many of them. But it makes for a wonderful downtown that we want to keep safe and clean and attractive and create that urban energy that is what draws people to come to Missoula, to go to concerts, go to events, go to Grizz games, hit our downtown. It's just one of our centerpieces, I think, in Missoula. But all right, I do have some questions now. Sandra.
Thanks. I had two questions. The first one is it still true if you don't pay for park? I guess this is a parking question, but your first parking ticket downtown is a freebie, and that you get a thing that says "Thanks for visiting our downtown" instead of a ticket.
That is a question for the Missoula Parking Commission. The answer is yes. The very first ticket you get is a zero paid ticket. You get a notice. And if you don't get any tickets, I think within a 12-month period, that clock resets.
Okay, cool. And then the second question is, since it is the downtown improvement district is funded entirely by the property owners in that area that choose to be a part of it, do they get like a vote on how the money is allocated, or is it just strictly up to you guys?
The BID board sets the budget and the council approves the budget. And we have an annual meeting of BID ratepayers, which we had most recently in June, to have conversations around what's important, what's not, but we do not put the budget out to all 640 property owners to vote on.
Okay, thank you.
Great. John?
Yes, you mentioned that you were having a little bit of difficulty with the graffiti. Are there plans to take care of that or find someone, I guess, who can take care of it? Because it seems like it's becoming a little bit more in town. And
yes, graffiti has increased dramatically during the pandemic. In 2020, we cleaned up over 3,000 graffiti tags in the downtown district. There are two resources for cleaning up graffiti. One of them is our maintenance crew, and we can power wash. We do hot water power washing, and we use a product called elephant snot to clean up graffiti on public and private properties downtown. The other resource is the Anti-Graffiti Task Force with the police department, and the downtown BID funds most of the supplies for the task force. Unfortunately, we've lost many of our great volunteers on the task force. One of them, who had been on the task force for 10 years, retired in December. So we have a couple of different issues that we're struggling with. One of them is rooftop graffiti. We do not have the right equipment to get up on the roofs of downtown buildings to clean rooftop graffiti. So we typically refer that to a private contractor in town. but the property owner needs to contract and pay for that service. And oftentimes when they do, for example, last year, the Union Club paid close to $10,000 to have their rooftop graffiti cleaned. And within 48 hours, the graffiti artists repainted an entire mural on their building. The other place that we struggle is, you want private property owner approval to clean the graffiti off of their building, and it's not always easy to connect with and get that private property owner approval. So we're limited with people on the task force, and our BID maintenance crew is limited on where it can clean graffiti.
Thank you. I had a feeling it wouldn't be a simple answer.
Linda, thanks for that answer. And one thought I had is maybe sometime in September, we can have a presentation to council or an informational item in committee where we, it sounds like we have had some key volunteers who have retired after many years of service, and having one or more champions on an issue like that can really be a game changer. And maybe we need to spread the word in town and shine a little light on the fact that we are looking for some more volunteers to champion this. There is this volunteer group that Linda referenced through the police department that they do a lot of anti-graffiti, they clean it up. But we've lost some key people. So maybe we need to try and spread that word a little bit. So I'll mark my calendar for September, Linda, and maybe we can chat then. But all right.
I would like to also give consideration to how do we prevent it from happening in the first place. If all of our efforts are really on cleanup, we're not solving the problem. We're just spending lots of resources to clean up, people's vandalism, basically. So we need to do a better job on the front end, and I don't have the solution, but how do we prevent it happening in the first place? Much of our public infrastructure, you look at the whole Higgins Avenue Bridge, the new stairs down to the park, the pavilion. I mean, all of our parks, and the Parks Department also has a graffiti cleanup crew. We're spending way too much time and too much money cleaning up graffiti. We need more effort on the front end to prevent it from happening.
Great point. I totally agree. Any other questions for Linda regarding the Business Improvement District? Mrl.
Linda, the preventative, I guess, if you will, way to the graffiti issue, is it in part helped by a police officer who works in downtown? And can you speak a little bit about that partnership?
You're talking about our dedicated downtown police officers?
Yeah.
Yes. So the BID has a partnership with the police department to help fund 2 dedicated officers that patrol downtown 7 days a week. That's part of our safety budget. And, it is helpful to have a police officer presence, but they're not on the beat 24/7. They do a lot of work with property owners, business owners, and our homeless population. And Jay Gilhouse and Alexi Berger are our current police officers. And Jay's been with us about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, and Alexi's been with us about 2 months. So it's pretty common to have dedicated policing in a downtown district. You have more people who work and consume downtown than you have in a lot of other neighborhoods. So your interactions and your crime rates are a little bit higher in that dense part of your community. So the BID is a strong partner with the police department.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Linda? All right, well, Linda and everyone, we really appreciate your time and all the work that's gone into that budget. And we really appreciate all of the work that goes into the downtown. It makes a huge difference. All right, well, thank you. I think we are concluded with our Business Improvement District. We did have a little bit more time in this meeting. As I referenced at the beginning, I I think instead of council deliberations, I would call it council discussion. I just wanted to, first of all, flesh out our schedule on the budget. So staff is still working with the mayor to finalize the mayor's budget because they do have the Department of Revenue numbers, but now they are finalizing the budget. So although we had a preview from the mayor, 5-6 weeks ago, it's being finalized, and that will be presented to council a week from today on August 10th. And there'll be a presentation. We can ask more questions. And one thing I want to put to council today is if there are any areas that you want to inquire further of staff on, let me know now during this meeting or email me so that we can have those people available a week from today on August 10th. So that's one topic I wanted to make sure you're aware of. We will have time on August 10th for further questions regarding new items, any new requests, and all of the things that go into the budget. So if there's anything that you want more information on August 10th, let me know. We'll queue that up. Additionally, the public hearing on this opens on August 15th and closes on August 22nd. So just to give you a little history, in the past, we used to finalize the budget in late July. And then we had a year or two where then the Department of Revenue numbers came in different than we were anticipating and had to revisit the budget in late August, which is absolutely no fun. So that's why we do it this way. That's why we just hold off until we have our true hard numbers and we can have this final discussion. We also had situations where we would take amendments in committee, we would address some things, and then we would have the final public hearings, and some of those amendments would come up. And if someone was not present, you have a different vote. It just wasn't the best practice. So that's why for the last few years, we have not taken amendments in committee, but instead we kick it to the final public hearing. And that's where we do all amendments, vet them, discuss them, debate them, vote on them. So I just want to make that clear right now that on August 10th, we will hear the budget from the mayor. We can have questions, but it won't be active for amendments. And I need to have a further discussion with Marty to just make sure we are clear procedurally on if we'll start with amendments on August 15th, or if we should just do all amendments on August 22nd. So I'm sorry, don't have full clarity on that, and I don't want to misrepresent anything. So I will, on August 10th, we'll discuss that. Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody have any thoughts on more information that they want next week so I can queue that up? All right, Mr. Hess.
Thanks. I guess it's been an informative budget process as always, and I look forward to seeing the mayor's final executive budget recommendation. One thing that would be really helpful is some context about what our peer cities are doing. I know that this is shaping up to be a challenging budget year in terms of potential tax increase and revenue challenges and structural budgetary problems that need to be addressed. And I'd just really like some context of what's going on around the state. I also would like some context. I mean, the state has a $1 billion budget surplus, in excess of a $1 billion budget surplus, and I get the feeling that cities and towns around the state are squeezed, and it would just be interesting to shine a little light on that, on what our peers are facing and how that fits into the broader statewide picture. So that's my request.
Okay, thanks. And Lee, I see you hopped on. Did you have thoughts on presenting on that next week?
This is one of the items that we are preparing. We know that we're not alone in our current situation, so we will be bringing that information for our other peer cities. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sandra?
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify the question that I asked you and Jordan yesterday. So on all the budget requests, whenever it says the fiscal year 2023 unfunded, we need to make, if we want that to be funded, then we need to make a motion to fund that. And then if it is funded, and we don't want it to be funded, then we need to make a motion to take it out of the budget. Is that correct?
Correct. So basically you are correct. And that's a great point to bring up. Thank you for raising that. So when the mayor's budget is presented and the motion is made, then the mayor's budget is on the floor. So to change it, we're going to need a majority of whoever is at the meeting and voting. All right.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you. And then I'm going through everything, and I might be putting up a lot of amendments. Would it be inappropriate to send out an email of things that I'm thinking of proposing, or do I need to wait for a quorum during the meeting to do that?
Good question. I think it would be good. So in the past, if there are amendments to be made, frankly, if counselors know ahead of time, I think it makes for a richer discussion. And I know that we do have a quorum issue. So Jordan, if you have any thoughts on this, or Jim.
I mean, I think it's, I'd like to hear from Mr. Nugent as well, but I think it's completely appropriate. And it, like you said, it helps everyone be prepared and to think about those amendments. And I think I don't see any issue with it at all. It's, it's not like it's not like a land use discussion where there's property owner due process issues. So I think it's perfectly appropriate to make council aware of that. But again, I would like to have Mr. Nugent weigh in on that.
Jim? I'm not sure that we have Jim with us. So Sandy, we could follow up with an email response to that. But I think it's frankly more oh wait, I think we do have Jim with us.
I was just multitasking and had my screen covered, but I could hear you. So Jordan, what was the question again?
Well, Ms. Vasika asked whether or not it would be appropriate to circulate proposed amendments in advance of the public hearing. And my opinion was that was appropriate. And I just wanted you to weigh in on that.
Oh, sure. That would make sense. I think it probably would allow for additional thought by the council members as well, because they know this is coming, this amendment or that. But I don't see any problem circulating that. In fact, it's probably helpful to the council members to have that circulating in advance.
Thank you. And I see that Marty Rabine is here with her hand raised. Hi, Marty.
I was just going to say the exact same thing. City Council actually had a list that you used to keep called the tickler list. It was a running list of potential things that council members were interested in doing. I will caution you that the reply all button and weighing in on said list is a problem. So discussing the list in email is a problem, but proposing a list of potential amendments and sharing that out with your colleagues and with staff is actually very beneficial as we get to the end of the budget process. Just don't hit the reply all button and hold forth about your opinion about the list. All right.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim and Marty. Sandra, does that answer your question? You feel like you have clarity?
Yeah, I have a lot of clarity. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, awesome. Any other thoughts to share today or additional information you'd like next week? I am not seeing any, so let's sit tight, and we will have August 10th to have the full final executive budget presented to us. We'll go over it, see if there's any changes compared to what was broadcast earlier in June, and answer questions then. And I think it is really helpful having those amendments out ahead of time so that people can digest them. It's hard to do things on the floor and wrap your mind around it in the moment, especially for something as complex and as big as the budget. So, okay, well, hey, everyone, thank you so much for all of your patience today, the good discussion, the good questions. I really appreciate it. And without seeing anything else, we will stand adjourned.